been severed from normalcy. What was the daily matriculation of his life among his people? This Samaritan sadly has contracted leprosy. And as a result, he is plunged into what was a surrounding of shared misery in a confined lepers colony. In the lepers colony, it no longer mattered whether you were a Jew or a Samaritan. They both meant little to people protecting their freedom of communal engagement. They didn't care. They didn't care whether you were a Jew or a Samaritan. They did care that you were a leper. And so the reason they ostracized them and pushed them to the outskirts of town is because they wanted them to spend their days among themselves who have contracted this miserable malady. Just look at each other as this disease or curse, many believed it to be. Look at each other as the curse destroys your body parts, decimating fingers and toes, ears and noses. Nobody placed in the lepers colony can come near the village, and those in the village made it a point to stay intentionally as far away from the lepers camp as possible. Any and all necessities are to be placed in a spot somewhere safe where the lepers can later retrieve them, and the only contact commonly witnessed between lepers and the outside world was when they shouted to those who approached the camp, more often than not intending to quickly pass by it. This Samaritan leper has, on top of all of this just described, what had to be the tense position of also being in a camp with 9 other lepers, each of whom are Jews, he being the only Samaritan. He, like the other 9, knew very well that there is but one escape from this pitiful existence aside from death, and that is if a miracle is to take place. And if that happened, a priest was then called to verify it by examination, and should the priest declare a leper to have been cleansed or healed, he is then liberated from this isolated camp where he has expected nothing more than death, living around others who too awaited death and who wrestled, as you and I can imagine, with the why questions of life. Why, God? Who are you? Why has this happened to me? These questions are always raised when it feels like life pushes you to a place where it appears to be unfair, ill-warranted, and unfairly imputed. These lepers had heard that miracles had been extended through the life of Jesus, and that there have been countless people who have experienced him, and as a result experienced complete restoration of sight and limbs and freedom from internal distress and spiritual apathy. And these lepers have heard that Jesus was on his way to Jerusalem to attend and to participate in one of the feasts. Somehow they also hear that his route is going to bring him near enough to where each of them are quarantined, that if they could peradventure get his attention, then maybe what is reported that he's done for others, he'll be willing to do for us. And grace brought opportunity right within proximity of the camp where they could for themselves see Jesus in Mount Ararat. As Jesus approaches, these 10 lepers waste no time. They start shouting, Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. I can't say today what undergirding motivations or specific requests or certain expectations are couched in the content of what they say to Jesus. Maybe what they're really saying is, Lord, free us from leprosy. Maybe they're simply saying, relieve the physical and emotional anguish that all of us are managing. Maybe perhaps they're suggesting, Lord, help us deal with communal isolation, answer our internal spiritual quandaries and questions. I don't know all of the undergirding motivation that makes up the content of their expressions, but I can sum it up, Deb, this way. I know each one of them is saying, Lord, please don't let me do the rest of my life like this. And the question is, what would Jesus do? Would he approach that which is ceremonially risky, could place his ministry under a speculative light. They knew he had the power, but the question is, despite him having the power, will he be inclined to extend his power for our benefit? And maybe they knew, I don't know, but Jesus could choose as an option the simple response of speaking the word. And that's exactly what Jesus does. He says to them, "Go show yourselves to the priest." The lepers heard it. No change has taken place in the body, still suffering, limbs still bearing the ravaging marks of leprosy's unrelenting attack. No healing in a visible sense, but Jesus has engaged them, and that has to mean something. They have to think to themselves, we don't know what that means. Nothing about us has changed. We still are suffering the pain of leprosy, but he talked to us. It's got to mean something. His words always mean something. Everything he says has life and meaning and power and possibility attached to it, invested in it, emerging from it. Go show yourselves to the priest. And we're told that this is exactly what the lepers decide they're going to do. Maybe in their astonishment, they start to think to themselves, we better step out on our faith here, because he at least responded to us. Maybe some of the amazement is because he has said so little, and yet, even having said so little, it has released in us so much hope and excitement. Maybe they are excited and astonished and decide that being excited and astonished by what Jesus says is not only to be engaged by it, not only to be inspired by it, not only to be amused by it, not only to be stirred by it, but if Jesus engages you, he engages you so you can act on it. To receive it as an invitation to do something, to try something, to take a chance, to believe at a level different than life has been offering. So they decided together to take the chance. They start moving from camp, making their way to the place where the priests lived, when as they are walking, they start noticing change. Restoration of limbs, difference in movement and feeling, subsiding of pain, physical and perhaps emotional as well. Limbs that were missing may have even started to reappear, I don't know, but it was enough radical change that it was noticeable. They saw it, they felt it in themselves, and they began to notice it in each other. All 10 experiencing the power of Jesus' anointing. 9 of them are moving fast towards re-entry into the normalization of the life that they had once known. 9 of them are ready to engage people from whom they have been distant, from however long they've been confined to the lepers' colony, no doubt running to family and friends, others straight to homes that they have owned and to the life that they have managed. But the Samaritan watches the other 9 as they are racing from the noticing of being healed into the normalization of life as they have once known it. 9 of them are fast moving back to life as they knew it, but the Samaritan says, I can't move that fast. I can't take a step forward without taking a step back, finding Jesus, and saying thank you. He can do it because he no longer has to fear being close to anybody. He doesn't have to manage his life by protecting distance from people. He can manage life now from how close he decides to trust human engagement and exchange. He doesn't have to think of himself as a risk to other people because he brings nothing of his past, including the dreadful leprosy he has lived with. Nothing of his past has contaminated him in ways that he needs to live his life afraid of touching people or letting people touch him. And because this Samaritan has been used to double isolation, being both leper and the only different one among 9 Jews, he's grown strongly independent. He's learned how to make his own choices. He's not persuaded simply by the majority rule. It didn't matter what the other 9 were going to decide to do. He has learned to make his own choices. He turns around. He rushes to Jesus in a loud voice. He praises God. He falls to his knees at Jesus' feet and expresses his gratitude, pours his thanksgiving out to the Lord, the only one who turns around to say thank you. We don't focus on it enough, Mount Ararat. We don't often talk about the ways in which, while we are praising God, the ways in which our lives can also disappoint him. The text says only 1 of 10 returned to express thanks, and while it is clear that Jesus is moved by the Samaritan turning around and rushing to him to express his depth of gratitude, he is equally disappointed. Jesus is disappointed in the other 9 who decided not to do the same. How do we know? Because he raises to the Samaritan 3 relevant questions. 10 of y'all were cleansed, right? Where are them other 9? Is it for real that the foreigner is the only one returning to express thanks? You mean to tell me, Samaritan, the other 9 are going to take this moment for granted like this? They've learned about me all their lives through the law, having a chance to experience me up close and personal like this, and this is the choice they have made. And yet one Samaritan, with a much more limited exposure to the law, had courtesy enough, gratitude enough, thanksgiving enough to come back and offer me praise. Then Jesus does something a step deeper and a step higher and a step more meaningful as he engages the Samaritan. Hey, Samaritan, you don't even have to worry about going to the priest because you're already in front of one. I am what I was sending you to. So I'm going to handle the rest of this for you, and I'm going to precede all of it with this announcement. Now you don't even need confirmation from the priest. You don't need a physical examination because your faith has made you whole. I want to take the next several weeks, same text. I want to take the next several weeks and unpack this encounter among the lepers and their engagement with Jesus, the choices that they make, perhaps the reasons for which they make these choices. But this weekend, I am so fascinated by the response Jesus gives to the 10 while passing by after hearing their shouts for mercy. Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. Here's his response. Go show yourself to the priest. That's kind of sterile, isn't it? I mean, you would expect Jesus to say things like, let me extend my compassion to thee, be healed. Go show yourself to the priest, and when you get there, you shall be healed. All he says is, go show yourself to the priest. You're ready to be examined. The leprosy camp should not be your permanent placement. You're not to live stuck here. Go show yourself to the priest. Do you all hear it? It's a chance simply to stretch yourself. And here is what these 10 lepers have to wrestle with. After all that we've heard about Jesus and the miracles he has worked in other people's lives, after this limited restrictive place to which we have been quarantined, after losing our homes, our wider human connectivity, can we trust this? Because it has so little guarantees. He doesn't give us any promises.